I flew into an aspen whiteout, only to hear the receptionist whisper, "Your parents booked a heated suite for your sister's luggage. But nothing for you." I was worth less than a suitcase when the staff offered me a janitor's closet to survive. My sister snatched the key for her nail tech. She laughed in my face. "Stop acting helpless. Michelle, you're the smart one. Right, figure it out. Don't be selfish, and take the room my staff needs. If you freeze to death out there, it's because you're stupid. Not because I'm cruel." She left me to die for a manicure. Drop a comment, and let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I stood paralyzed in the center of the lobby, my grip tightening on my suitcase handle until my knuckles turned white. The cold from the door was still clinging to me, but the chill inside my chest was spreading faster. The receptionist, a kind woman named Sarah, started typing furiously on her keyboard. She told me there was one option left. It wasn't a guest room. It was a staff sleeping quarter near the boiler room. Windowless. Cramped. Usually reserved for overnight maintenance shifts. She offered it to me for free because she couldn't in good conscience send me back out into the storm. I was about to say yes. I was about to thank her for the scrap of dignity. But then the elevator doors pinged open. My sister, Gabriella, walked out. She wasn't dressed for the weather. She was wearing a cashmere lounge set that cost more than my first car. She saw me standing there, saw the desperation on my face, and she didn't run over to hug me. She didn't apologize. She laughed. A bright, bubbling sound that echoed off the high timber ceilings. She walked straight to the desk and told Sarah, "Actually, give that key to my glam squad. My nail technician needs a place to store her kit for tomorrow morning." I looked at her. I looked at the sister I had tutored. The sister I had bailed out of debt 3 times. The sister I had protected. She looked right back at me with dead, bored eyes. She told me, "Michelle, you make partner money. Right. Stop playing the victim. Go find a Motel 6. Then she turned on her heel and walked away. As she left, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was an Instagram notification. Gabriella had just posted a photo of me, looking disheveled and abandoned in the lobby, to her close friend's story. The caption read, "Vibes ruined. Why does she always look so stressed?" In that moment, my training kicked in. As an architect, I know that when a structure is unsound, you don't try to patch the cracks with wallpaper. You condemn it. I didn't scream. I didn't chase after her. Screaming is what they want. It's fuel. It validates their importance. For years, my maturity had been weaponized against me. They knew I wouldn't make a scene because I was the responsible one. They banked on my dignity to cover their cruelty. But standing there, watching her walk away, I realized that fighting them gave them supply. Silence would starve them. So I chose starvation. I picked up my bag, nodded to the receptionist, and walked back out into the killing cold. The wind hit me like a physical blow, stealing the breath from my lungs. I dragged my heavy Rimowa suitcase through the snowdrifts, moving away from the entrance, finding shelter under the concrete overhang of the valet stand. My fingers were numb inside my gloves as I pulled out my phone. The screen was wet with melting snowflakes. I didn't call a motel. I didn't call an Uber. I dialed a number I had saved as the builder. My grandfather Arthur. He answered on the second ring. His voice was gravel and steel, the voice of a man who had built skyscrapers from nothing. "Michelle," he asked, "you're early." I didn't cry. Tears are inefficient when you are reporting a structural failure. I gave him the data points with forensic precision. I kept my voice flat, stripping away the emotion until only the jagged facts remained. The missed reservation, the note left at the desk, the theft of the staff room for a nail kit, the Instagram post mocking my distress. I laid it all out like a blueprint of betrayal. They left me in the storm. "Arthur," I said, my voice barely audible over the wind. "They took the last room for a glam squad and told me to find a motel." Arthur listened in silence. For 10 seconds. The only sound was the wind, howling around me, and the distant static of the connection. I knew that. Silence. It was the silence he used before he fired a contractor. It was the silence of a decision being poured like concrete. Then he spoke 3 words. Check your email. I pulled the phone away from my ear, my hands shaking from the cold, and refreshed my inbox. A document had just landed. It was a deed of trust amendment. Time-stamped 1 minute ago. I opened the attachment. I scanned the legal jargon, my eyes widening as the reality of the text set in. It was done. The transfer of authority was immediate and absolute. I was no longer just the granddaughter. I was no longer a beneficiary begging for scraps. I was the sole trustee of the family estate. Arthur's voice came back on the line. Lower this time. You are the architect now. Michelle, you decide what gets built and what gets demolished. Do you understand? I understand, I whispered. Good. Now, go back inside. Don't go to the front desk. Don't talk to the receptionist. Go to the alcove on the north wall. Take the private elevator to the top floor. The code is your birthday. The top floor, I asked. I kept the presidential suite off the books. He said. I thought I might need it for a shareholder meeting. It's yours now. Dry off. Pour a drink. And Michelle, fix this. The line went dead. I stared at the phone for a heartbeat, then wiped the snow from my face. I gripped the handle of my suitcase. The shivering girl who had walked out of those doors 2 minutes ago was gone. The woman who walked back in was the landlord. I pushed through the heavy timber doors, the warmth of the lobby hitting me instantly. I walked past the receptionist, Sarah, who looked ready to cry for me. She started to come around the desk, probably to offer me a blanket or a ride to the bus station. I didn't stop. I didn't explain. I just gave her a small, tight nod and kept moving. I walked past the other guests drinking mulled wine by the fire. I walked past the spot where Gabriella had laughed at me. I went straight to the discreet brass doors in the shadowed alcove on the north wall. I punched in the code my birthday. The keypad flashed green. The doors slid open with a smooth, expensive hiss. I stepped inside. The elevator was lined with velvet and mirrored glass. As the doors closed, shutting out the noise of the lobby, I caught my reflection. My hair was wet. My mascara was smudged. And my coat was soaked. But my eyes were clear. I watched the numbers climb 1, 2, 3, 4. I felt the physical sensation of rising above them. Above the noise. Above the insults. When the doors opened on the penthouse floor, I stepped out onto marble that was heated from beneath. I wasn't just safe. I was in command. The presidential suite was silent and vast. A cathedral of timber and glass overlooking the White Mountains. A fire was already crackling in the stone hearth, ignited by a digital command I hadn't even sent. I poured myself a glass of scotch from the crystal decanter. My hand steady. The amber liquid burned pleasantly on its way down. A stark contrast to the freezing wind that had bitten my face minutes ago. I sat down at the heavy oak desk and opened my laptop. It was time to conduct an audit. I wasn't just angry. I was methodical. I logged into the trust's banking portal. The interface was clean, precise, and damning. I watched the transactions scrolling in real time. There it was. Pending at the top of the list, Silverleaf VIP Spa and Gold Leaf Facial Package. $5,800. I stared at the number. $5,800. That was more than the down payment on my first apartment. That was the cost of the relaxing afternoon they felt entitled to, while I was being offered a janitor's closet to sleep in. For years, I had convinced myself that fixing their problems was an act of love. When I paid off Gabriella's credit cards after her influencer trips went over budget, I told myself I was being a good sister. When I smoothed over my parents' social disasters with generous checks and apologies, I told myself I was being a good daughter. I told myself that keeping the peace was the ultimate virtue. But looking at that number on the screen, the truth finally settled in. My silence hadn't been kindness. It had been a subsidy. By shielding them from the consequences of their own mediocrity, I had prevented them from growing up. I had created a vacuum where their entitlement could expand unchecked. By fixing every mistake before it could touch them, I had robbed them of the opportunity to become decent people. I had financed their cruelty. I realized then that the most architectural thing I could do, the most constructive act of love, was to let the roof cave in. You cannot renovate a house that is built on rot. You have to condemn it. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my titanium architect's pen, the one Grandfather Arthur had given me when I made partner. It was heavy, cool to the touch. A tool of creation and correction. I used the stylus tip to tap the screen. I selected the $5,800 transaction. A menu popped up asking for a reason for the flag. I didn't hesitate. I selected Unauthorized User. Then, I went to the Account Management tab. I saw the list of active cards: Father's Platinum, Mother's Gold, Gabriella's Black Card. With a few keystrokes, I froze every single credit card linked to the family name. I flagged their accounts for immediate review. I watched the status lights on the screen turn from green to red. One by one. Locked. 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 I closed the laptop. The silence in the room was heavy. Not with loneliness, but with power. It was the silence of a job site, right before the demolition charges go off. I took another sip of my scotch and waited for the explosion. Down in the spa, the atmosphere was thick with eucalyptus, steam, and the heavy, humid scent of unearned entitlement. I wasn't in the room, but I know the script by heart. I know exactly how it played out because I know them. My parents and Gabriella were likely lounging in plush white robes, their skin glowing from the humidity, holding flutes of vintage champagne that cost $40 a glass. They were probably laughing about me. They were probably joking about how the boring sister was currently figuring out a bus route or haggling with a motel clerk while they prepared for their gold leaf facials. They felt safe. They felt protected by the invisible shield of Grandfather Arthur's money. The spa manager would have entered the private treatment suite right about then. He wouldn't have knocked softly. He would have walked in with the brisk, serious energy of a man who has a problem to solve. He would have looked uncomfortable, holding a small wireless payment terminal in one hand and a printed receipt in the other. I imagine the conversation vividly. He would have cleared his throat, cutting through their laughter. He would have told my father, "Mr. Walker, I apologize for the interruption, but there seems to be an issue with the payment method on file." My father would have sighed. The dramatic sigh of a man who is inconvenienced by the incompetence of the service class. He wouldn't have even looked up from his magazine. "Just run it again," he would have said, waving a hand dismissively. "It's a platinum card. It has a $50,000 limit. It's probably your machine." The manager would have stood his ground. I did run it again. "Sir." 3 times. "The issuer has declined the transaction." At this point, Gabriella would have chimed in, annoyed that her relaxation was being disturbed. "Dad, just give him another card so we can start. My pores are closing." My father, irritated now, he would have reached into his robe pocket and pulled out his backup card, the corporate one. The one he wasn't supposed to use for personal expenses, but always did. He would have handed it over with a sneer. "Here, use this one, and add 20% for the hassle." The card would have been declined. A long, angry beep. "Contact issuer security freeze." Confusion would have turned to panic. My father would have called Arthur. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Gabriella would have blamed Michelle, calling her incompetent. 50 floors above them. I watched my phone light up. "Mom. Dad. Gabriella." I let it ring, calmly sipping my scotch. Then the manager received his update. His tone changed. "This is not a clerical error," he said. "All accounts tied to this reservation have been suspended for suspected fraud, and the owner of Silverleaf Lodge has requested you vacate immediately." The realization came slowly. Frozen cards. Cancelled reservations. The sister they abandoned. The new owner. The manager said. Is Miss Michelle Walker. Minutes later. They burst into the atrium soaked. Furious. Humiliated. I descended the staircase in tailored black. Composed, and unmistakably in control. I looked like the owner. They looked like trespassers. My mother screamed. My father threatened. Gabriella pulled out her phone. Trying to weaponize her followers. I looked into the camera. I didn't steal anything. I corrected an accounting error. The trust is not for people who abandon family in blizzards. Then I laid out the facts. I was the sole trustee. The glam squad was fired. The spa bill was personal. The trust cards were frozen. They owed $5. 800, and had 5 minutes to leave before security intervened. Gabriella broke. Not from losing money, but from losing the audience. The staff watched her with pity. Not envy. Her phone slipped from her hand and shattered. You were supposed to fix it, she whispered. Not this time, I said. Security escorted them out. Their luggage stayed behind as collateral. They walked into the snow with nothing. 6 months later. The trust funded housing. Not excess. My parents downsized. Gabriella worked retail. We never spoke again, and the silence was peace. Arthur sent me his first blueprints. No note. Just trust. Sometimes. The only way to build something that lasts is to let what's rotten collapse completely.